From Screen to Shelf.
What is going on, everybody? Will here with From Screen to Shelf. I am here with my partners in crime, Gabe and Chase. Happy 2024, everybody. Happy New Year.
Let's go. We back.
Let's go. We are excited to be here. We're super excited to be here. We're excited to be back from our hiatus. What has it been? 2 weeks, fellas? 2 or 3
Feels
weeks
like
now?
It's been longer.
It
Dude,
does.
It really has.
It does. We were all super busy around the holidays, but we were fortunate to be able to crank out as much content as we could. Over on the YouTube channel. But today's episode of our podcast, it is a special episode, a very special episode of From Screen to Shelf, because it may be 2024, everybody, but the three of us are here to talk about our not only favorite theatrical films, or we should say streaming release, because I guess we can count streaming as technically theatrical.
Yeah, whatever,
now.
however it came out.
Because we're in a weird time now where new movies aren't just released theatrically, they're released on streaming. So we wanted to show some love to films that are released on streaming platforms as well. But we're going to be talking about our top films of 2023, both theatrical and streaming and physical as well. Now, Chase, I'm going to hand this over to you real quick just to give everybody, as far as our listeners, a breakdown of how we're going to do this, because it's going to be structured somewhat differently in terms of how we're breaking everything down. So if you want to take it from there and just kind of just give the listeners an idea of how we're doing this.
Yes. So how this one's going to be orchestrated is for our audio listeners, because we do video feeds over on the YouTube for our audio only, and for our video only, we keep longer form discussions over on any type of podcast platform of your choice. So this will be one fluid episode for our audio only listeners, and it will be dropping in two parts. For theatrical / streaming releases will be part one over on the YouTube, just so it doesn't run super long. And then part two will be physical media releases. So that's how we'll be kind of prefacing this. And then we'll repeat that just for people that may have clicked on part two for the YouTube listeners. Or watchers. Will be also prefacing this again, that will be a part two, but we're going to be starting it off with theatrical / streaming releases. Pretty much any movie that had an official release date of 2023 from January 1st to New Year's Eve. So that's how we're going to be kind of breaking this down, and we have quite the tastes to share with you today.
Yeah, and just to preface too, like, we have not seen everything, guys, because I know some people might be in the comments or, maybe in the chat just kind of saying, how did you not put this movie in or whatever. First off, everyone has different tastes. We all have different opinions. And second off, we're super busy. We haven't seen it, like, everything. Like, there are some movies that we were just talking about that I have not seen yet for 2023 that I really want to, like Dream Scenario, Iron Claw, which Will just reviewed. It sounds like an amazing movie. I just have not had time to get to everything. So there are some movies. Maybe we might change this later on. But for now, this is, like, as of right now, the movies that we have gotten the chance to see, this is what's on the list.
Yep. Exactly.
So I don't know if you guys want to start with, like, just like maybe we could rotate, like we can start with our number 5. Everyone go around and do their number 5. Number
with
4.
our honorable mentions, and then and then we're gonna do a rotation.
Let's start with honorable mentions. Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. And Will, open us up with your honorable mentions, my man.
Of course. Real quick, just to clarify, do we want to throw because I have a few honorable mentions, guys. I got like 3. I had more, cool. But I really want, for time, for the sake of time, I cut it down. Do we want to just run through all of them one by one?
Yeah.
And then
for honorable mentions,
we'll go one by one. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So, guys, this was hard. And, we were talking about this before we went live. It was just a great year, not only for physical media, but for theatrical releases as well. I think we got a lot of movies in 2023, and we talked about this briefly. We've touched on it in some other episodes in terms of movies that, although they were big budget, seemed much more original. And we talked about how there's potentially like a turning tide with audiences wanting bigger budget releases to be more unique, right? To have more of an identity. I felt like we got a lot of movies like that this year. So this was hard. It was a hard list to kind of narrow down. And, it started off, I had like 20 movies on here that obviously some of which I'd seen in theaters and then some of which I'd seen months later after the fact. But I narrowed it down. I want to shout out, the first one's a documentary. So I don't believe this got a theatrical release. It was a streaming release, but it premiered on Apple TV. So for those of you who have Apple TV, I'd highly recommend checking this movie out. It's called Still, and it's a Michael J. Fox movie. So this is a documentary pretty much about Michael J. Fox and his rise to fame as one of the biggest superstars of the 80s. And essentially the rest of the film just focuses on his battle with Parkinson's disease. Now, I grew up watching his movies as a kid, Back to the Future, Teen Wolf. Those movies are like staples. They're on the shelf upstairs in the family room with the TV, because every time we got people over, we got the nieces and nephews over, those are the movies that we show them, and Michael J. Fox has been an inspiration for me personally. And this movie was just so hard to watch at times, right? But at the same time, so motivating, so inspirational. Like, he is someone who has consistently made me want to be like a better person, just knowing how hard his life has been dealing with this. And the fact that he was diagnosed, and I don't know if anybody knows this, they touch on it in the documentary, and I didn't even know this, guys. He was diagnosed with Parkinson's at age 29.
Dang.
Oh, wow. He was young.
He was 29 when he got diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, and he continued acting. He continued working low key. He didn't mention it to anybody. I believe only his wife and family knew. And I just think it's such a symbol of how dedicated he is to his craft, or was to his craft as an actor. And just how to be professional and how to carry yourself, as a human being, and understanding that, there's certain things that come up in your life, and you got to deal with them head on. And he is like a shining example of that. I mean, he's dedicated most of the rest of his life after that moment to funding research for Parkinson's. And he's just been an icon and an inspiration for so many people. And if you're a fan of Michael J. Fox, if you grew up in the 80s or in the 90s and have seen his movies and have been influenced by those films, this is a really powerful movie. It didn't make my top 5, but it's one of those movies I wanted to throw out there because I wanted to give, kind of that documentary film genre some love. And I think they did a really fantastic job in allowing him to tell his story, just about his struggles with it and how he's dealt with it. And it really is a really great snapshot of what his life has been like. And it's very touching. And what I love about it most, and what I love about him as a person, is that as hard as the struggles are that he has had to deal with, he's Michael J. Fox. Like he just goes about it. He's got that same sense of humor about everything. And that's what I love about him. And that really shined through in that movie. Even during these interviews, when there's like somber moments, he finds a way to find, he finds comedy in it, and he's perfect at that. So I'd highly recommend Still, a Michael J. Fox movie. It's available on Apple, as I said. So if you guys have Apple TV, definitely check that out. That's one of my honorable mentions. The other two, I'll get into the next one here. Now, this one's interesting because we've talked about superhero films. We've talked about whether or not superhero fatigue is a thing. And I do believe it is, but that doesn't mean that there aren't great superhero films that can still be made. And that can still resonate with audiences and can also just demonstrate creative ability behind the camera, or in this case, in the drawing room, right, in the drawing board, and that is Across the Spider-Verse. I wanted to shout this movie out. Not only is it one of the best-looking movies visually that I've seen this year, but in terms of the story, I mean, this is something that I wish other superhero movies would emulate. Again, when we talked about those superhero films, I don't know if you guys remember, one of the big things with me with the superhero genre that I find is lacking nowadays is that sense of uniqueness, that sense of identity with each particular movie. And I think Across the Spider-Verse, not only does it do that with its animation style, it kind of separates itself visually from a lot of the other movies out there. But I think in terms of the story, in terms of what it presents to us as an audience, it's a very unique and interesting and entertaining movie. And I think a lot of people are going to like that. A lot of people have seen Across the Spider-Verse. That's a popular one for a lot of people, but I wanted to shout that out. Really enjoyed that for a superhero movie from somebody who doesn't watch superhero movies often. I'm not a superhero guy. I really enjoyed that movie. So that's another one on my honorable mentions list. And the last one, this was hard, guys. This was really hard because originally this was in my top 5. It was number 5.
Okay.
But as I was looking back throughout the year, especially going back to the beginning of the year, there are a couple films, or one film in particular, that popped up that I had forgotten about. And I said, shit, I gotta move, I gotta move this one down a spot, unfortunately, because the other one, it came close. Yeah, man. And but I gotta give it its credit, and that is Killers of the Flower Moon, Martin Scorsese's just somber tale of the Osage people. And Lily Gladstone, she absolutely killed it. I mean, she carries this movie. Not that the other performances aren't great. I enjoyed Leo. I enjoyed Robert De Niro. I mean, everybody gives a great performance, but I mean, this is her movie for sure, and I really hope that she gets an Oscar nomination. I don't know if they released the list of nominees yet, but I'm really hoping she gets credit for this. But I think from someone who didn't necessarily enjoy The Irishman, I talked about that. For me, it wasn't a movie that kept me engaged. This was totally different. I really enjoyed this movie. Got the chance to see it in the theater, loved it. Glad I saw it in the theater. It was a great experience. So that is my last honorable mention.
Okay. Good picks, dude. Chase, what about you, man?
Guys. Okay. I go second. Let's see. Will and I actually share a similar title. This one bumped out. It actually wasn't in my top 5, and I'll go into detail why, but it definitely rounds out at 6. Across the Spider-Verse. I agree with you, Will. That's one of the best movies of the year. I only had one problem with it, and I'm not a big fan of 2-parters, and I don't like cliffhangers that I'm probably gonna have to rewatch this, and that's fine. It's my honorable mention for a reason. It's just it ends, because it is a part 1 of 2. Into the Spider-Verse to me is a better movie because it has a finite story that you can just watch indefinitely through one part. But that doesn't take away for what this movie does spectacularly. It gives you a lot in a runtime. So shout out to Across the Spider-Verse, same thing. Shout out to the disc as well. That one is a immaculate transfer, bright colors, looks great. And then this one actually was going to be, at one point it kept slipping as time went on, but it was an earlier release in the year, and that is going to be Megan. I loved that movie. I loved Megan. That movie was just so fun. I've been on record saying I don't like the Chucky comparisons. I get it, doll versus doll, but it has its own unique identity, especially the unrated cut gives you a little bit of extra edge to Megan herself. A very, very solid story, very, very unique and different. It kind of feels like what the 2019 Child's Play wanted to do, but it felt like was held back from doing, right? So I wanted to shout out Megan 100% of the way. Megan was a fun ride, and I kept having to remind myself that came out this year, especially with the 4K coming out way later. It almost slipped past the radar completely. A fun movie, and I'm eagerly probably going to go see it at premiere for Megan 2 when that comes out. I believe it's slated for next year, if you didn't know that. And this one's going to get you guys by surprise. This is a movie that I watched with a crowd of friends. I had an absolute blast with this movie, and that's going to be Tim Story's The Blackening. That movie was
it came out earlier in the summer.
Yeah, that movie was just so fun. It's not by any means a perfect movie, and this one actually was one that was number 5 on my list. But then as I started looking again, I think what elevated it for me is I watched it with a group of friends when the 4K dropped. I unfortunately get to go see it in theaters. I watched it at home, but that sense of experience with my friends, that's one of the best laughs I've had in a movie in a long, long time. It is really good. It leans a lot more on the comedy than it does the horror. It definitely has some tense moments, but through and through, it just plays into a lot of stereotypes while not really playing it safe. It's a really, really good movie. The actors, they have a lot of camaraderie, the actors and actresses. Just a great casting, just amazing. These people play off of each other like they grew up as friends and then got casted in like a friends film. Kind of think Clerks, you know, like like Kevin Smith just took a camera to his friends and made a movie. That's kind of the charm that the camaraderie of the cast gives me in this. I've actually seen this movie multiple times because I just kept laughing, and it has a lot of replay value to me, which is why it broke a part of my honorable mentions. And then I wanted to shout out one last one, which is surprising it didn't make my list, but it did get bumped out by other worthy candidates. But I needed to give a special nod to John Wick Chapter 4 for being one of the best in its own series. And that's high regards because I don't think there's a dud in the entire series. Fantastic movie where a long run time feels super tight somehow, you know? Keanu Reeves gives a hell of a performance along with Donnie Yen's character, just everything about it. Special shout out to the action sequences, the practical effects, everything, the choreography. A very great movie that, again, I forgot came out this year. It's been such a jam-packed year, but shout out to that. Yeah, that's gonna round out my personal honorable mentions, and gonna pass it off to Gabe Diggity Swag over there.
Gabe Diggity Swag. All right, guys.
Oh,
you
yeah,
guys
we should mention, guys, that we got
Yeah.
our names here, too. We forgot to talk about that, but that's
Yeah.
more for the visual.
Well, it's brand new.
for
We're
the
new
YouTube
people for
guys.
2024.
Yeah.
We got Big Willie Styles, we got Chase Waggy Tail, and Gabe Diggity Swag. So
Yeah.
those are going to be our new 2024 names. Joking.
I've decided to pursue a second grind as a rapper to help fund my physical media habit.
There
Things
you
are
go.
getting rough out here on the East Coast. So
I think you
Gotta
guys
do
hit
what
a
you
lot
gotta
of them on, like, you hit the nail on the head with a lot of these already, like the honorable mention. So like I'm not going to go into them too much. One that stood out to me that I actually talked to Will, I think I talked to you about it as well, Chase, is The Creator. That was one that came out this year, man, with Gareth Edwards. Such an original movie, and it really resonated with me, man. It was such a powerful movie, and the effects, like, he shot this on, I think it was like a $6,000 camera. It was a Sony FX3 or something like that, which is mind-boggling. It's just super inspirational to me, also kind of as an aspiring filmmaker. Like that's the stuff that I love seeing. You know, it didn't have a crazy budget, and the visual effects were freaking phenomenal. Just a great story, very like unique kind of take on the science fiction AI thing, and it's. I wish it kind of took off a little bit more. I know it kind of got, I think it kind of got like mixed response, but overall I loved it. I thought it was a fantastic movie, and it was just super exciting to see something different, just some new content that wasn't just another IP in 2023. Across the Spider-Verse, I had that too as my honorable mention. You guys hit the nail on the head. It's just a freaking fantastic movie. And the only thing I want to say about it is I think the reason it's so good is because it focuses so much on Miles, you know what I mean, and his kind of like journey, as opposed to what all these other superhero movies are doing, where it's like, you know, you get this crazy villain and you focus on the villain. Who's the villain? Who's the villain? The freaking villain in this movie is a polka dot dude. That it's super silly, but it's like, you know, the story lies with Miles and kind of his journey in terms of, you know, taking on the mantle of Spider-Man. So freaking fantastic movie. I loved it. The other one I have here, I think this one is a Hulu exclusive, actually. So it didn't come out.
Okay.
I think it came out theatrically for a little bit, but then it was on Hulu. So this one is Ben Affleck's Air. So it's the Michael Jordan movie with Matt Damon that stars. So Ben Affleck and Matt Damon are in it. I'm a huge Michael Jordan fan, so like this was kind of like a given. I had to see it, but it's actually a really fantastic movie. Just kind of the barriers and obstacles that they had to go through just to get this shoe made. It's freaking really intriguing to see, and it's just a good drama. So if you guys just want, if you're into sports and you like kind of like sports dramas, and it deals more with, obviously with Nike, but it's a really intriguing story to watch. So I highly recommend that one.
I have a question about that one, Gabe.
Yeah,
is it a documentary or is it like?
No, it's a film.
It's a drama.
Yeah, it's a drama.
So
it's based on real events.
So Matt Damon or Ben Affleck plays Michael Jordan?
God.
You know what? I got it. Let's check IMDb here and see, because I don't remember. Yeah, but fantastic movie. It's a really, if you guys haven't seen it, highly recommend it. And I'm not going to get into these other. I had like 3 more. Dungeons and Dragons. Just a quick shout out to that one, because that one was the worst trailer that I've seen in years. It turned out to be one of the best movies of the year. Like, it's such a fun movie. Highly recommend it. David Fincher's The Killer. Really loved that movie. The end kind of is what, I think took it from being great, but it's a really solid movie if you guys haven't seen it. And Scream 6. I actually put that down just because I freaking love Scream. Yeah, Scream 6, dude. I freaking loved the whole New York vibe, and I feel like it was the most, we talked about in an earlier podcast, but the most different Scream movie that we've had in a while. And I think that they knocked it out the park with that one. So didn't reach my top 5, but it's in there as an honorable mention.
Great nod. I totally forgot that came out this year again.
There's so many movies, dude.
So many
Too many
ones,
movies,
man. But yeah, good nod.
I'm glad you mentioned The Killer, because it was cool to see Fincher back in action too. I mean, I feel the same way that you did, though. I felt it kind of lost some momentum in that, the final act.
Anticlimactic ending a little bit, in my opinion.
Yeah, but still worth checking out for sure.
Absolutely. So now we're gonna get into the contenders here. So the actual contenders. So Will, if you want to bring it, or you can start it up with your number 5. We're gonna do a round table for number 5 right now.
Yeah, baby, this was hard. As I said. So many, all these. So as we get into the top 5, I had a very specific goal in mind, and that was, if I met like a long lost loved one somewhere, and they said, "Hey, I want you to show me the movies that you think are worth." I approached it like this. I approached it with the mindset of, if I had to show someone 5 movies, someone who was on a deserted island and hadn't had human interaction or any kind of, had no exposure to pop culture in years, right? And I wanted to show them movies to make them feel something again. Okay, these are the movies I would show them from this year. So
I love it.
Number 5, and this was hard. I'm going to keep prefacing this.
We're ready to talk shit, by the way. No, I'm just kidding.
You're blue balling us,
I don't think there's going to be no shit talking here. I think we all have some fire picks, but number 5 was John Wick 4.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Number 5 was John Wick 4 for me. I agree with what Chase said earlier. To me, this movie did not feel like 3 hours. This movie breezed by. Not one person in the theater was dozing off during this. I mean, I had a fantastic time with this movie. I saw it with 3 of my good friends that I've known for probably over a decade now, since high school, old buddies of mine. And we got the chance to check this out back during the release, and it was wild, man. The theater was going crazy. I mean, I've talked about John Wick before. I'm not like a super John Wick fanboy. I'm not like one of those guys that's into like the tactical stuff and all that. But I will say this: I think these movies, not only do I think they revived Keanu Reeves' career, and we talked about this before. I think I talked about it with you, Chase. John Wick, the first John Wick was one of those movies that when you look at the original poster art, it looks like a direct to DVD or direct to video.
Yeah.
Just like a one of those action movies that you see like on late night TV somewhere, just like a direct to video type of film. And these are anything but that. I mean, they are essentially, not only are the set pieces and the set design incredible in terms of the lighting and the cinematography. I mean, these are reference quality movies for a 4K setup if we're talking about home theater. But I think for action films, I mean, they are going to be looked at for the next 10, 15, 20 years. People are going to look back on these movies, in my opinion, as a means of how to do things, right? In the modern era of action movie making, right? I think John Wick, they're directed by, Chad Stahelski. Yeah, Stahelski. He I believe he's a former stuntman. We've talked about it before, but he's a guy who understands, the depths that it takes to go to make great action sequences with fantastic stunt work and choreography and fantastic special effects. A lot of stuff that's practical. You guys know me. I'm a big supporter of practicality and what can be done on the day in the frame, with minimal reliance on what you need to do in post, right? And these movies are just absolutely fantastic. And I think 4 kind of encapsulates what I loved about each of the previous films. It kind of takes each of those movies and just steps it up, and that's what these movies have been doing ever since the first one. They've just been stepping it up a level, with each release. And I think 4, it's one of those movies that I will say I doubted, because when I saw that runtime, and I think I talked to you guys about this at one point or another, I was very skeptical of how they could stretch this
3 hours
to a 3-hour film. And they pulled it off. And not only did they pull it off, they pulled it off in absolutely jaw-dropping fashion. I mean, that top-down shot with I think it's the dragon's kiss or dragon's breath. I forget what the weapon is.
Yeah.
The shotgun it's one of the best scenes that I've seen in a film, period, in a long time. Not necessarily an action film. And then we have just amazing sequences in addition to that, like the whole fight sequence and the shootout on the stairway. Right?
Yeah. Oh God, yeah, dude.
Just all these fantastic sequences. Donnie Yen stole that movie for me. He was. I think it's probably one of the best performances of his career. Such a charismatic character. The unique things that he did with that character. I watched some of the behind the scenes on the 4K, and just what he brought to the role. I think that movie was Donnie Yen's movie to shine. Right? And as much as I love Keanu Reeves, I think Donnie Yen stole the show. Like I said, I think that was a vehicle to showcase his ability as a talent. And I love everything about those movies, but I love John Wick 4. So John Wick 4 is my number 5 of the best films that I've seen this year.
Awesome, dude. Nice. I agree with everything that you said. And it's funny that Donnie Yen stole it, being another blind guy again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right after Rogue One, he's like, "Yeah, I'll play a blind guy."
Yeah.
I just think the finesse that he brought to that role with, being a blind character, the movements and just the thought process that he had, going into that is just something that was so unique. And I think it elevated the whole movie. Every scene that he was in, I mean, I love the whole movie, but he really, I loved his scenes. He was absolutely fantastic. But I mean, the cast was stacked regardless, but yeah, that's 5 for me. Who wants to take the mantle next, Gabe or Chase? Which one of you guys wants to go?
You put the pressure on me, Chase.
Yep.
This one will actually be an easy follow up because my number 5 is John Wick Chapter 4.
Nice.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm not gonna go on too much about it, but I was going through 2023, and I'm like, I almost forgot about it just because it was on the earlier end of 2023. This came out in March, I believe. But I mean, I agree with everything that Will said. I think this movie it is the standard now of what an action movie can be. And I think that I think Chad Stahelski and Keanu Reeves, Donnie Yen, everyone in this movie did a fantastic job. And I want to just something that Will didn't talk about. Not only just the practical effects, the choreography, but also I think the John Wick movies, man, they do like some of the best work with lighting. Like some of the lighting in these movies is just freaking gorgeous, dude. Like when he's at that freaking the I forgot where it was. I think it was the Japanese Continental Hotel with all the
it's like the garden.
Oh yeah, dude. Great. Oh my God, the neon lights and stuff. It just looks so freaking. It's just so beautiful to look at, dude. And it's so beautiful to look at while Keanu Reeves is just murdering like 200 people. The kill count in this movie is like beyond ridiculous. Like it's just
insane.
It's unfathomable. It doesn't make any sense. But literally, I think that this is probably the epitome of what an action movie can be, and they just killed it with this movie. And like what you guys said, the runtime 3 hours, it feels like 2 hours just because how well paced it is. So I hope that, personally, I hope they don't do a chapter 5. I think this is a perfect way to kind of end the series personally. I think they ended it on a high note, and they should be proud of themselves, and they did a freaking fantastic job. And John Wick Chapter 4 is definitely my number 5. Freaking fantastic movie.
Oh yeah. I feel shamed putting it in my honorable mentions.
Yeah, I was like, man, you put that in your honorable mentions? Get out of here, Chase.
No, I mean it was great, man. Like Will, you said it perfectly. Like the way that one shot with the dragon's breath from the top down view reminds me of a video game called Hotline Miami.
Dude, I love Hotline Miami. Yep, love it.
That was the first thing that went through my head whenever I saw that. I was like, beautiful.
They actually got the idea. It wasn't from Hotline Miami, but I think it was another game. I saw an interview with Keanu Reeves and Chad Stahelski. They were talking. It was like another top-down game like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's actually where they got the inspiration from. And I think it was an interview with IGN. They're like, "Have you guys seen Hotline Miami?" They're like, "No."
Oh wow.
But it is just like that over top shot, dude, with the fire breath shotgun. It's just
Yeah.
so freaking beautiful, and how it goes between the rooms, and it's
Perfect.
I love it, dude. Freaking best shot
Yeah.
of the year, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So Chase,
All
your
right,
number 5,
guys.
sir.
So my number 5 is actually a movie that box office wise didn't make any money. But I remember when I went to go see a movie in the theaters, this pre-rolled. This is a movie published by Neon, and I was over the moon. The style and aesthetic of it reminded me of a Ty West film, which I'll compare it to here in a minute. But this is a Mark Jenkins film. If you know who that is, he did a movie called Bates that kind of has a little bit of a cult following. But this is a movie called Ennismen. Ennismen is it's Cornish for Stone Island. It premiered at a festival in 2022, but it's based on Cornish folk lore. And I don't know if I would necessarily call it folk horror, unless like psychedelic. It's not really even psychedelic torture. It would be categorized as that, but it's categorized as a folk horror film where you really don't know what's going on. Everything is kind of told in between vines. As you have Mary Woodvine as the volunteer. These people just all have like their titles as their character names. So she goes to like this little lighthouse type of deal, and she watches this flower grow. And so she's like a nature observer. And as she's watching it grow, she realizes that after a certain amount of time, it reverts back to being a seed. So she cannot properly perceive time. But that's just the beginning of it. So then she starts to hallucinate. She starts seeing things. She starts writing in the journal and realizes that she's writing in circles and repeating the same stuff. And it is one of the most original films I have seen in a while. And my comparison to Ty West's House of the Devil is because this was shot on 16 millimeter. It looks like something that came out in the 1970s, and it is based in 1973. It is one of the most intriguing movies I have seen in a while. It tells a lot of story through just the camera work, and I love stuff like that because it gives you a lot of rewatchability. Again, the name of this movie is Ennismen, Enys Men. Definitely check it out. Watch the trailer. Give this movie some love. It only made 549,000 box office. But it also, like, I struggled to find this movie. It pre-rolled before another movie, which I'm going to give a shout out later. And I wanted to go see it day one, but none of the theaters in any area of where I live showed it. So I think it just had a limited theatrical release. Hopefully it made some money, but Ennismen, shout out Ennismen, Mark Jenkins. I'm excited for what this director does next. This was a very, 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 very indie film. You guys definitely will probably love it. It looks literally it looks amazing. The story is great. I know some people are kind of tired of those Joker style movies where like everything you see you can't necessarily believe, right?
Yeah.
But I still get joy in those. There's times it's done right, and there's times that it just gets overbearing, right? But yeah, shout out Ennisman, fantastic movie. Give it a stream. It's up on Apple TV, not like with a subscription, but you can rent it on Apple TV, any streaming service. I'm pretty sure that allows you to rent. You can find this movie. That's how I eventually got a hold of it since I couldn't go watch it theatrically. I just bought it and yeah, love that movie. It's been living in my head ever since I saw it. And that was way back. I think it dropped on streaming around June or May for rent. So
I remember the
definitely.
trailer for it. I saw it. I
Yeah,
don't
I was
remember what movie it was. I looked it up right now, and I remember that trailer.
Yep. It's really good with like the people that are standing on the rocks and like the cultists and stuff
And
like
when you
that.
said 16 millimeter, that's when I remembered that. I was like, oh yeah, it's that movie.
Yeah, because whenever after I went and saw the movie that it pre-rolled for, I was sharing it in the server for a while. I was like, you guys need to go watch this. This movie looks really, really good, and it definitely didn't disappoint. That's why it breaks into my top 5.
It's a good pick, dude.
Yeah,
Solid pick.
I had to throw something out there that probably a lot of people would be like, okay, you know. So I had to throw out that out there because
Educate us, Chase.
Yeah, it's a great movie. Definitely a great one. So that gives us our we'll say tinfoil for our 5th picks. Not quite bronze, silver, or gold. They get the tinfoil. So now we'll go ahead and break into our 4th picks, and they're gonna get a lump of steel, I guess.
Big Willie Styles.
Yeah, man. Well, for number 4, I'm going big. I'm going nuclear.
Okay.
Well, no, I shouldn't say nuclear. I don't know if I should say nuclear, but you want me to give it away?
No, I thought you just gave it away.
Oh, well, I'll name some other films that the director's done just to give people an idea of who we're dealing with here. Okay, follow
I'm
him.
gonna start getting excited.
Okay, Insomnia. Does that ring a bell? What about what about the let's go
My
a little,
man.
let's go a little more present.
Sure.
Dunkirk. You're still not sure? You want me to keep going, Chase?
I'm blind. Keep going.
You're talking to the guy who still hasn't seen Inception and Tenet, by the way.
Where is it? Are we kicking him out now or are we waiting?
I'll give him 10
waiting.
more seconds.
Oh, he's waiting. Batman Begins, The Dark Knight, Tenet. That's right.
The one that
Gabe knows. Chase, come on, you got to know. No,
I got you.
My fourth pick, guys, and I mean this movie again. I want to preface this too. All these movies are fantastic. You know, it's hard to really put one over the other, but with me, and I'll touch more on this as I get closer to my number one pick. I'm going in order of how I was affected by these movies, and number 4 is Oppenheimer. I can't deny, like I'm not the biggest Christopher Nolan fan, and I've said this before. I respect Christopher Nolan immensely for his approach to filmmaking, but he's one of those things where I feel like he gets a lot of hate, right, from people, for no reason, just because the Nolanites, so to speak, and his kind of following of fans who are diehard. Gabe, I'm talking about you.
While I'm pointing at myself.
Exactly. But you and this is the thing, you can't deny his impact on the industry, his impact on filmmaking. And Oppenheimer, I think, is again just another example of the fact that I don't think Chris Nolan necessarily has missed at all. And I can point out a few films that I thought were good and that didn't quite get there for me. But Oppenheimer, I think, for a movie what's the runtime on this movie? I forget, because this is a long movie
3
as
hours.
well. It's almost 3 hours. It is a 3-hour biographical drama. Okay. And yet this movie made, I don't know if it's past that mark yet, but I think it was close to $1 billion.
Yeah, pretty close to it.
So, I mean, with such a stacked cast, I mean, we talked about the practicality with this movie. There's almost no CG in this movie, very little.
No, actually, there's none.
There's none at all.
From what he's declared, he said there is no CGI in this movie whatsoever.
I will say, when I saw this in the theater, I was blown away by it in the theater, but there were some moments that were a bit hard to hear. But it's much more of a dialogue-heavy film. I will say, and that might have been my theater. I still enjoyed the movie immensely, but when I watched this again in my home theater, I enjoyed it much more. And again, I loved it the first time, but the second viewing, I loved it that much more because I was actually able to pay a little bit more attention. The sound was slightly better. I could hear some more of that dialogue. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what else to say about this movie that we haven't already said or that hasn't already been said. I mean, this is going to be probably on a lot of people's top 10 lists or top 5 lists, I'm sure. It's just a fantastic movie. I think Cillian Murphy gives a fantastic performance. Again, anybody, like I mentioned, Lily Gladstone. We're going to mention some other actors as we go, through our lists here. If these actors do not get nominated, then I question humanity, because I think Cillian Murphy gives a fantastic performance. I mean, he sold Oppenheimer to me. He embodied everything about the man that Oppenheimer is. And I just think I think this is possibly Nolan's one of his best works to date. And I really love Dunkirk. I think Dunkirk is a movie that a lot of people tend to not like as much, but I think Dunkirk is fantastic. I saw Dunkirk and said, okay, Nolan is really going beyond what I envisioned in terms of how he's growing as a filmmaker and maturing as a filmmaker. And I think that Oppenheimer is frankly his magnum opus. So, and I will go to my grave with that, because I think that it's probably the best thing that he's done, in my opinion, to date. And that's really it. That's really all I have to say about Oppenheimer. That I'll talk about, if we want to talk about the Trinity test sequence, I still think that's one of the greatest things I've ever seen. Just the build up to that moment is so nail biting. And I just remember being in the theater and everyone, it's one of those moments where everyone was silent, but you could feel you could feel how tense everybody was. It was, and like, you know, those are the things I'm going to keep coming back to as we move up, or as I move up my list. It's movies that really made me feel something, you know, watching them. Like, wow, this is like I'm experiencing something amazing here, right? It's Oppenheimer's number 4, and it's a movie that I am happy to have seen in the theater. I've seen it like 3 times now, and obviously own the 4K. So it's one that I'm going to be watching, hopefully yearly. You know, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I'm happy to own it. I think it's one of the best movies of 2023, and it's number 4 on my list.
So Will survived this podcast. We'll see if Chase does or not.
Yes, we will.
But no, I mean, I agree with you, man. I mean, it's the Trinity test. I think the thing I always say about that scene is you know what's going to happen, right? Like, we all know the outcome of the movie, but it's still like the way you're able to build tension despite knowing what's going to happen. It's mind boggling. And I think that, you know, when that bomb drops and it's just pure silence and you just hear the breathing and, you know, the practicality of it too, you're seeing this, you know, massive explosion that they're able to kind of do. It's freaking a beautiful scene. So
it's so rewarding because, like you said, we already know what happens, right?
Yeah.
You know, from history, but even watching the trailer, it's like, okay, you know that moment's going to come. It's just a matter of how Nolan chooses to get us there, right? And that's what's so amazing about it, is that, you know, you think you know how he's going to do it based on, you know, his previous films and his aesthetic and how he builds scenes with music, and he has those amazing sequences in his movies, and we've seen all that, and we kind of, you know, using his cinematic language, you try to decode how he's gonna approach this subject matter, and it's still mind blowing. So
yeah,
you know, never ceases to amaze me.
Good pick, brother. Good pick.
Thank you, brother.
Number 4. We're on number 4, right?
Yeah, Oppenheimer's your 4th, right? As well.
Yeah, of course. No, screw
it's
you.
4, 3,
2. Number 4 for me is one I actually did a review on the podcast for. It is Bradley Cooper's Maestro.
Nice. Okay.
That movie, I will say, I think it probably has the best performances that I've seen all year from any movie.
Nice.
So it's not my number 1, but if I had to, like, just from performances alone, I think Bradley Cooper and Carey Mulligan probably deliver the best performances of the year. And I think that they have a very high chance of winning Oscars, 100%. Dude, Bradley Cooper's just, he's starting to get up there. I think with, you know, after A Star Is Born, yeah, he's just a talent, dude. He directed, he co-wrote the screenplay and starred in this movie. And he is just like a force to be reckoned with now. And I think that he's making a name for himself. And this movie, it's this, you know, it's just a beautiful analysis of a relationship. It's not really a biopic, you know what I mean? It doesn't go through his whole life. It really just focuses on Bernstein's relationship with his wife. And it's so just intriguing to see just whether they met from a young age and how their relationship kind of develops over time. And it's just a lot of emotional moments in that movie, dude, that kind of stick with me. I was excited to see it. I didn't think it'd be in my top 5 whatsoever, but walking out, I can just see Bradley Cooper's craft kind of developing, how he uses black and white, how he frames, like, the cinematography of some of these scenes are freaking gorgeous to look at, and the performances that he's able to get in his movie. He knows what he's doing. And if you guys ever get a chance to check it out, the final sequence where he is literally conducting a freaking orchestra, it's freaking mind-boggling. He's like dripping with sweat, and you can just see the passion that he has for this material. It's I got goosebumps pretty much watching it during that final orchestra scene. It was just like I'd never seen something like just so freaking someone's just so passionate about a project. and it's a shame that, I mean, it's a Netflix exclusive. I think it was only in cinemas for like maybe like a few weeks, and then it hit Netflix. But it's, you know, just his use of black and white, his use of, he shoots on film, he's changing the aspect ratio kind of throughout the movie, and it's kind of all, you know, thematically themed. I'm like, dude, this guy knows what he's doing, and it just makes me even more excited to see where his career's going and what he's going to do next. Highly recommend it if you guys haven't seen it. It's on Netflix streaming right now, so you could watch it for free. It's freaking a fantastic freaking movie. And if he doesn't win, and you guys know I love Oppenheimer, I would even argue I think he might have beat Cillian Murphy for the Oscar.
Damn.
Okay.
And even Carey Mulligan, who's a fantastic actress. I've seen her in a few movies. She's in Promising Young Woman. I think it's probably the one that she's most popular with. I think she also, Lily Gladstone, I think she might be able to beat Lily Gladstone. Just fantastic performances. So highly recommend it. Bradley Cooper's Maestro is my number 4.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I remember watching your review, and you made me want to go see it. So I definitely need to check it out. Haven't yet, but need to check it out because it sounds like very, very, very strong. Kind of the way you describe it reminds me of Tar from last year, like the way that was talked about.
Yeah, that
know
one
what
was
I
like
mean?
really like a more, I think Tar was more of a same kind of, you know, obviously it's about like a conductor, but like Tar is definitely more of a, it's kind of like a stressful anxiety.
Oh, is it?
Like
Oh, okay.
dreadful
I never
like
watched it
movie.
either.
Like it's
Yeah.
I mean, Kate Blanchett kills in that movie.
Yeah.
It's more anxiety provoking and more
Yeah.
dread. This one is kind of more just, like I said, kind of like an analysis of a relationship.
Okay.
So there's moments of like hope. There's, you know, really bad moments that happen. I think at the end you really get this kind of, you know, beautiful, you know, bow that's, you know, tied up. But it's you know, they went through a lot of crap together. It's based off of a true story. I don't know a lot about Bernstein's past, but Bradley Cooper knocked it out of the park. Friggin' incredible movie. And I think produced by Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese. So they were there to kind of help Bradley Cooper through the whole process.
Hell yeah.
What about you, Chase? Number 4, man.
So this one I gauged, you know, my number 5 pick was definitely something relatively unknown. Number 4 I put in there as a gauge for how much fun and how surprised I was by this. This is gave it major honorable mentions list, but Dungeons and Dragons.
Wow, it made the top 5, dude.
Top 5. It actually went top 5.
Hell yeah.
I rewatched it after we had talked about it, and I just have so much fun with it. It really
so fun.
was. It's just like, it's not like one of the greatest movies you'll ever see, but I've said on here before that comedy is genuinely one of the hardest things to do, because if you don't laugh, you walk out pissed off. If you don't even remotely have a good story or something, nothing redeemable about it, this thing strikes every single chord. You'll laugh in the first 5 minutes. Yeah, the story, the whole breakout scene, just it gets me every single time. I don't get numb to it. The rewatchability, I've seen it a couple of times now at this point. Shout out to the disc for that as well. It's a great quality 4K disc as well. It's super, 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 super fun. I had an amazing time with it. Whenever it comes to Dungeons and Dragons, like, it actually, the camaraderie isn't as strong as like what I was saying with something like The Blackening, right? Like that has a great cast, you know, they're all playing off each other. I do think that some of the casting decisions felt a little bit weird, like Chris Pine's love interest. You know who I'm talking about? I forget who plays her.
Yeah, I forget the actress's name, but yeah, because I've seen it now and I don't remember her name.
Yeah,
like that seemed a little off.
Yeah, like she's a great actress. It's just the chemistry. You know what I mean? That's probably the biggest complaint I had about it. But otherwise, every single thing about it was super, super fun. Like it really, really was. Have no complaints about it other than that. It'll make you giggle from front to back. I think this is a movie that will hit cult status in 30 years. I really do think so. I think this will be that movie. You know what I mean? Like there's some movies after time wears out and stuff like that. I know it has strong word of mouth as well. Like the word of mouth for this movie is extremely strong. And I think that's essentially what brings it up there, because like Gabe had said about his honorable mention, the trailer was bad, like laughably bad. And that wasn't even their worst decision, was the trailer. Their worst decision was to open up a week before Mario. That was their worst decision.
Oh yeah, I remember, right? It was
I think it would have done better as a summer flick. I really do.
But I mean, you had Barbie and Oppenheimer coming out in July too.
I get that, but what about
there was
June?
a lot going on.
You know,
I
June
think
was relatively
Mission
dry.
Impossible came out in June, didn't it?
Yeah, Mission Impossible I think was June.
That's true, but you can't beat Super Mario. That thing did 1.3 billion, man.
Yeah, dude. I think it just came out at the wrong time. Like it really did.
But yeah, it's like I was saying, I think in 30, 40 years, if we don't get a sequel, this will be one of those movies that people really wished got one. If you haven't seen it yet, it's a really strong performance by everybody involved. It's just great. I cannot. It's not a 10 out of 10 masterpiece, but it's definitely a really, really, really strong movie. If you want a great time, you're gonna have a great laugh. The characters are great in it. Strong recommendation, and I really, really do hope that they do at least a second one. With the same cast. So. Yeah, the chemistry with everybody, but like his love interest was relatively strong. I just think it was a little bit of like she played her role well. I just don't think the chemistry between Chris Pine and
Michelle Rodriguez. Yeah.
Was that Michelle? Okay, that was Michelle Rodriguez. I just don't think they had the best chemistry. You know what I mean?
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
I think it was just I think it's just kind of everyone had a fun time. You could tell everyone was just having a blast.
Everybody's having a blast.
Yeah.
Everybody. Even the bird that has like 5 minutes of screen time had a blast. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's gonna get my award of steel for 4th place.
That's awesome, dude.
I had the lump of steel. I had to give it a shout out, man. I have to give it its 5 minutes of fame out there. Just I know it has, like I said, I know it has strong word of mouth, but I need more people to see it. It needs to. It's gonna hit cult status, man. It really is. If it doesn't get a sequel in 30 years. That'll be one of those movies that people will be like, have you ever seen Dungeons and Dragons? No, okay, we'll go watch it. You know what I mean? Because it's just a good time. It really is funny.
And what you pointed out,
the word of trailer was. Yeah, I was saying it's a shame that because you guys actually talked about it, and that I ended up seeing it because of you guys, especially you, Chase. Like you were telling us to check it out, and I ended up checking out. I was like, damn, like that trailer really did not do this movie justice, and that's a shame because it you know, there's plenty of people that I'm sure saw that and said, nope, like not interested, you know, and like they could have marketed that movie. I mean, just from the trailer alone, they could have done it totally differently and actually, you know, got more people interested. Cause I saw the movie and was blown away by actually how, again, it was engaging. Like it was actually funny. So, and I don't even play Dungeons and Dragons, but they had a lot of references in there as well, which I'm sure people who have played the games appreciate. So yeah. Good pick, dude.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Power of word of mouth, man.
Yeah. Now we're going to bronze. Now we're actually on top 3. Exciting, exciting. I'm excited to see what Will's top 3 is because I know he's been putting so much thought into it, and they've been different for each one. So I'm excited.
My top 3 are probably the most, emotional movies I think I've seen in a long time, and we'll get right into 3. This is a movie that I believe is a directorial debut, and that is Celine Song's Past Lives. Which
I wanted to see that this year, man.
Yeah, so I was actually not. I mean, this movie was not on my radar. This is an A24 film, which I was unaware of. But a couple people from the community recommended this.
Nice.
I think Craig. Shout out to Craig, and someone else from the community mentioned this movie. And I said, okay, like if Craig really enjoyed it, I'm gonna check it out because him and I have similar taste. And I think it was available on, I forget where I watched it. I want to say it might have been either through Amazon or like Google Play. I forget where it's available. But it's Celine Song's directorial debut. She also wrote the movie. Now, I believe she's done some writing work before. She has some writing credits to her name. But for someone's directorial debut, I mean, dude, this movie just got me. I mean, it gutted me. And I'm someone who, like, I don't watch romantic comedies. I'm not really into like romance films or romance dramas. But I gotta say, man, I mean, the subtlety in which and the grace that she approaches the characters and the presentation of the story in this film. It's a story about 2 people in Korea. I should shout out to Greta Lee, by the way, and I think his name is T.O.U., the other actor, and then John Magaro. I'm trying to remember what else I've seen him in. He plays Greta Lee's husband in the movie, who she meets once she moves to America. But essentially, they grow up in South Korea. They're childhood friends who have a very close, intimate relationship. And when she and her family emigrate to America, she kind of leaves that life behind. And that's really what this movie is about. And I think her name is Nora in the film. That's Greta Lee's character. And TOU plays, I think it's Haesung or Haesung or something like that. And they end up reconnecting years later, and that love is rekindled upon reconnecting. But this movie, most importantly, it's a movie about living in the past versus moving forward and choosing what's practical in life. And it's a film about destiny. It's a film about closure, and saying goodbye to past relationships, hence the title Past Lives. But it's so beautifully done. And the ending, there's this tracking shot where Nora's character, and I don't really want to necessarily get into spoilers here, but Greta Lee's character Nora, she says her final goodbye. And that tracking shot is one of the most beautiful things I think I've ever seen in a movie in a long time because of the build up to that moment. And it's so well done. And I completely broke down like a baby. So I'm just going to say that right now. This movie definitely hit me hard. So if you guys are interested in this, I would definitely check this out. Highly recommend it. I mean, A24, they seem to do no wrong. So they've produced this. And there's some really great juxtaposition shots in this film that I think were fantastically done. And I think the character work in this movie was just against the stereotype of what I'm used to seeing in these kinds of movies, romance dramas and like romantic comedies. The ending is very non-conventional. It's very different than what you're used to seeing in, again, the traditional Hollywood, romance film. But it handles it so well, and the character work is incredible. Like John Magaro's character, he plays, as I said, Greta Lee's husband in the film. He is like his character. They handle his character so well because if this was a standard traditional Hollywood film, the husband would be the guy that you want to hate, right? Because the way they set it up, it's like, okay, well, now her childhood love interest is coming to America to visit her, and the evil husband that she's currently with is going to get in the way of that, of rekindling that childhood flame. But they actually treat his character so well. You actually end up having a lot of empathy for the husband as well, which completely took me by surprise. I did not expect this movie to do what it did with these characters, and it was just really refreshing. So yeah, Past Lives is my number 3 pick, folks. Very emotional movie, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else Celine Song does, because I mean, apparently she wrote this based on personal experience, which is fantastic. So the fact that she got to tell this story with more of a personal connection to her own life, I mean, is amazing. But it's a fantastic film. So that's my number 3 pick, Past Lives.
That's a good one. I'm kind of peeved I didn't get to see that this year, because that's definitely one that's been on my list that I want to see for sure. It's gotten nothing but like great reception critically and just from audiences in general. So I'm glad that it was on your top 5, man.
Yeah, and I'm again, shout out to Craig. I appreciate him, and I'm so sorry, but I forget who else was mentioning it. But thanks to them, I got to check it out and experience it, and I'm glad that I did. I took the chance. I was like, let me see what this is about. And yeah, it instantly in my top 5. So yeah, Past Lives, check it out, guys.
Good pick, man.
All right, Gabe, you're up next, brother.
Holy crap, man.
Number 3.
Number 3. This is one that I think we were all super hyped about this year. That kind of took us by surprise. This one is a movie that I was excited to see, but I walked out even more excited after I came out of it. It is Godzilla -1.
Nice.
Which may make some of your lists. I don't know if it did, but yeah, man, we've talked about this movie so much. I mean, we had like an hour and a half podcast about it, but I mean, it's just still, I'm not going to repeat everything that we've said, but it's a solid monster movie with a great human story to it. And it's something that's just impeccably well done. You know what I mean? I think it went back to the roots of Godzilla, but also just kind of added this very human story to it. And I think people responded to it. And it's something I'm excited to see again. I hope it gets some kind of 4K release. I'm not sure if it will or not, but I hope it does. It's just been, ever since I've seen it, it's been in my top 5. Like, it has not moved at all whatsoever. I've maybe shuffled it around in my top 5, but it stayed in my top 5. A lot of people have seen it. I'm not going to beat a dead horse here with it, but it's a fantastic movie. I'm excited for the follow-up if they do it. Just a freaking fantastic monster flick with a good story, and I hope that they follow it up with something similar. So Godzilla -1, that is my number 3 pick.
Admirable. I thought I would honestly rank second, but now you got me curious for what your second pick is. So
yeah, same here. Same here.
Yeah, I really thought it was going to be your second pick. So now I'm eagerly awaiting to hear what your second pick is and what gets your silver.
What's your
2 and 1 are? It's the first half and second half of Oppenheimer, just broken into 2 categories.
Yeah, just hey, I need more
part
time
1, part 2.
Yeah, I need a lot of time to talk about this, man. You may not have heard about this movie named Oppenheimer.
Yeah, of course. What about you, man? What's your number 3? Chase.
So this was my favorite movie. We just got some damn heat as the year went on, and then there was one that came out earlier in the year that I got a hold of later, and it kind of bumped it down to this spot. But that is going to be he's the son of a god. He's the son of David Cronenberg. His name is Brandon Cronenberg. He recently came out with the movie.
The son of a god.
Yeah, he's the.
I love that.
This is his 3rd full-length feature film, Infinity Pool. You have Alexander Skarsgård. It's Alexander. I know there's Bill, and I'm pretty sure it's Alexander. You have Alexander.
Yeah.
And then Mia Goth. And I'm going to use this time to sell people this movie, because if I didn't sell it to you with how much I've talked about it before, this movie has so much cool stuff going on for it. And I didn't want to talk about it, but this is the trailer this is the movie that Innisman opened up for, because they're both by Neon. They were both distributed by Neon. So if that rang any bells, I just didn't want to say Infinity Pool because then people knew I'd put it on my list. So Mia Goth, anything she's in,
future wife.
You gotta go see it. Yeah, future wife material right there, right? You gotta go see it. She's just this. I mean, it doesn't reach Pearl Heights. It doesn't reach. I think maybe her performance here is better than X, but they're 2 completely different types of characters. She's just a very erratic, emotionally distressed individual, and very socially and mentally manipulative. And she just plays it from the second she comes on screen. You can tell she's plotting on everybody in that room. She's got a goal. She has people already entwined in that. And so Alexander Skarsgård plays a writer that essentially goes to vacation on this island of I forget the exact. I actually don't know if it is named. I think it might be. But they go there, and she starts chatting it up with him. And essentially, where the plot ends up taking place is they get hammered. This is maybe 15 minutes into the movie, and he kills somebody while driving down a road. And so they just try to, we're on an island, it's pretty remote, and we probably aren't going to get caught, scratch that, the smaller the thing, the smaller the place is, the more eyes everywhere, essentially, right? So they get caught, and they essentially have this option to buy their way out of their mistakes, so they can get out of everything consequence free. So that introduces the Infinity Pool, and I think it's a really cool concept, and I really kind of want to leave it at that and sell you to that point, because once you get into the Infinity Pool, if you don't like it past that point, you really probably won't like the movie. But I find it to be such a cool concept, and especially with the way that it ends. The performances from everybody from Skarsgård to Goth, everything from the creative direction to the orgy scene. That has to be the most creative orgy or sex scene in a movie ever. Like the way that it's done.
Weird shit, bro.
Yeah, like it's just got some weird stuff. Like you can tell it's Cronenberg through and through and through and through. If you've seen Possessor, if you've seen Antiviral, there's no way that you won't like this movie. I think Brandon Cronenberg should be on everybody's radar. I wouldn't even say up and coming, because you already have so much expectation coming into this world and choosing to be a filmmaker from the son of somebody like David Cronenberg. And for the fact for him to be able to come out, have his own style, have his own identity while still feeling in lineage with Cronenberg, is just absolutely something special. Huge shout out. And then I will shout out the 4K. There is an uncut version out there. It doesn't add too much. However you decide to watch this, whether you go rated or uncut, The uncut doesn't add much. I'll just put it out there. If you only have access to the rated version, go for it. You don't need to buy the 4K for just the uncut variation. It adds some very minor scenes that, honestly, I was clamoring for the uncut version. Once I got it, I was like, wow, it's almost damn near no different. It adds some frames damn near, and then a little bit more of an explicit scene. But yeah, I'm looking forward to whatever Cronenberg is doing next from either person. So shout out Infinity Pool. That was my favorite movie up until about summer, as I started watching more and more and more and more. Megan was some competition with it, but that Megan's good, but it's not a top 5. You know what I mean? It's not like a top 5 worthy. But Infinity Pool gets my I don't have an actual statue, but my bronze.
Your bronze place.
Bronze.
I think Infinity Pool is his best film.
I agree. There's some people
Personally,
that genuinely think Possessor, and I can understand on a story level. Possessor, I will give that is better on a story level, but with showcase, practical, Possessor just has a story you can relate to. I don't think you can necessarily relate to the story of Infinity Pool unless you're super rich, and even then, you're probably not watching Infinity Pool. You know what I mean? But no, I agree. Some people will argue that Possessor is better. Some people did not like Infinity Pool. If you didn't, I would recommend giving it a second watch. I think maybe it's one of those movies that can grow on you with more. Mia Goth, man, I just don't know how more people don't know about her. You know, I know within our community, a lot of people know, but you know, she's not quite A-list yet. But when she gets there and people get a hold of her past filmography like this, X Pearl, A Cure for Wellness, Marrowbone, and stuff like that, there's just no way. Nymphomaniac, she was in a Lars von Trier film. Shout out that's a fantastic movie too. But yeah, Infinity Pool, which is going to lead us into Silver.
Number two.
Dose.
Number 2, dude.
Big Willie.
I'm excited to see what yours is, Will.
Yeah, man. Well, my number 2 is a movie I saw late in the game, but I'm glad I did, and I'll just come out and say it. I recently did a review for this movie, and it's still heavily weighing on me, I should say. You know, in my mind and in my heart, and that is The Iron Claw, which is again another A24 production. Really great cast in this movie. It's about the Von Erich brothers and their rise to fame and their downfall, you know, throughout the 80s and into the 90s. And it focuses a lot on that aspect of it, you know, the spectacle of wrestling at the time and what it was like, you know, with them, you know, wrestling in Texas with the local promotion or the Texas-based promotion. I think it was the NWA at the time. And then it mentions their foray into the WCCW and all that. But it focuses also on the sheer tragedy that family has dealt with behind the scenes. I mean, I honestly think that they have to be one of, if not the most infamous family in wrestling. If in terms of what they've dealt with. I think this movie is possibly Zac Efron's best performance. I think it's one of the best things he's ever done. He's somebody that I've never really paid much attention to. But in recent years, I've started, you know, looking his way more, you know, based on the roles that he's been taking. But he just gives an absolutely unbelievable performance in this movie. But Jeremy Allen White, who also plays one of the Von Erich brothers, kills it as well. And if you guys aren't familiar with him, I mentioned this in my review. I know him from the show The Bear, which is a phenomenal show. Shout out. You know, I know we're not talking TV here, but check out The Bear on Hulu if you're interested in, you know, a very gritty, just realistic portrayal of what it's like, you know, working in a restaurant, you know, in the restaurant business. But Jeremy Allen White, just a fantastic talent, man. But Zac Efron, he really steals the show here for me. But yeah, this movie, it's like one of those things. We talked about it with kind of like Oppenheimer with the Trinity test, except, you know, for me, growing up being a wrestling fan as a kid, and then, as I said in my review, I'll just kind of rehash some of that here, you know, getting older, you know, and then with the advent of the internet and being able to go back and research, you know, past decades of wrestling, the late 70s and the early to mid 80s, and kind of discovering all these wrestlers that I fell in love with, what many consider, I should say, to be like the golden age of wrestling, which was like the 80s, right? That's where you got all these greats like Ric Flair, Bret Hart, Dusty Rhodes, just all these guys. And, I was fascinated with wrestling just because of some of the crossover it had with movies. One of the first movies or two of the first movies I remember seeing as a kid that my dad would let me watch, one was Predator and the other one was They Live. And I got to know who Jesse Ventura was, Jesse the Body Ventura, and Rowdy Roddy Piper, and it was stuff like that kind of got me more into wrestling, and especially wrestling and the wrestlers of that time period. But the Iron Claw is such a tragic snapshot of the Von Erich family and what it was like growing up under their father, who was a wrestler himself. But again, as I said in my review, he's just a very domineering, tough loving kind of guy. And you really see that dynamic play out in this film. Now, I should say this. There are a segment of people out there that have some issues with this film, and for good reason. I understand where the criticism comes in. They had to omit one of the actual brothers from the film, Chris Von Erich, who was part of the real family. There's 6 brothers, I believe, in all, in actuality. But the director has gone on record saying that it was a very hard decision to make for him to omit Chris from the film, but they had to do it for the sake of timing and runtime, and also the fact that there's so much tragedy in this movie that he said, I didn't want to have another character death, and that's why we omitted Chris's character from the film, because he felt that it was just going to be too much for the audience, and it was just like, it's like you're just watching these deaths on repeat, and it's a lot. It's a lot to take. Now, I will say, I think this movie will affect people differently if you're a fan of wrestling and the history. And they kind of take some stuff from, I guess you can say, Chris's life, and they apply that to his brother Mike in the film. So I want to clarify that, because there's people out there that are like, well, wait a minute, that didn't happen to Mike, that happened to Chris. But, they took some stuff from his arc and added it into Mike's arc just to kind of blend some of those events together, because they wanted to do it justice. And it's tough when you're trying to tell, let alone a story about one person, in like an hour and a half, 2-hour runtime. But now you got to tell, you got to, make a film about a whole family. I mean, that's challenging, to say the least. And I felt that they pulled it off in a very resounding way. I mean, it really resonated with me, guys. I mean, this movie broke me. It really did. And again, we talk about build up and how to close out a film. The final scene in this movie is where it got me, and it was one of those movies where I was like, okay, I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to let myself get emotional. And then there's just this scene with Zac Efron's character. He plays Kevin Von Erich in the film. And he's sitting there in his yard watching his 2 sons play football. And he's just sitting there. He's just breaking down. He's just crying. And the line that he says, his sons notice that he's clearly, bothered, and they run over to him and they're like, Daddy, what's wrong? What's going on? You okay? And his response, just the delivery and the line that he responds to them with, just broke me. Everything just came crashing down. So this movie really affected me in ways. I think even if you're not a fan of wrestling, even if you're not familiar with the Von Erich brothers and their story and the tragedy that their family has had to endure, multiple tragedies, I should say, I still think it's an incredibly heartfelt, engaging, really emotional, hard-hitting film. So I would definitely check it out. But that's my number 2 pick, guys, The Iron Claw. One of the best movies I've seen this year. So there you go.
A24's killing it, and Zac Efron seems to be just kind of developing his craft, man. He knows what he's doing now.
Yeah, and this really, again, if he doesn't get nominated, I mean, I don't know when exactly it was released. I don't know if it was on the festival circuit at all, but because some people were saying it's kind of late in the game for a potential nomination, but I really hope it's considered, because I do think he gives a fantastic performance here. And again, I'm not a fan of Zac Efron. I haven't really seen a lot of things that he's in. I know he was in the movie where he played, was it Ted Bundy?
Yeah, I think he did something for like Netflix where he was Ted Bundy. He's been taking, I haven't seen everything yet, but I noticed he's been taking a little bit more kind of, he's been stepping out of his comfort zone. You know what I mean? Because I think he did a lot of kind of like, you know, for lack of a better term, like pretty boy stuff, like comedies, and he's just, you know, like with his shirt off, like kind of like just like very generic stuff. But I think he's been trying to kind of step out of that, you know, that norm that everyone's kind of put him in.
What you just said right there, I think maybe I've said this before because I've spoken to people about this regarding Robert Pattinson from the Twilight movies and how he's kind of tried his best to veer as far away from that kind of image. Like you said, it's like the pretty boy, like fangirl kind of thing. I do think people lump Zac Efron into that category, and I love, like, because you can either take that and milk it as best as you can and just run with that for most of your career, or you can choose to say, no, fuck that. I'm going to run the other way and take roles that are daring and vulnerable, and challenging. And I think he nailed it with this role. I think you guys should watch this movie just for his performance. Not only is it a physical transformation for him, he put on a lot of weight and a lot of muscle to, you know, look like Kevin Von Erich, but his acting is fantastic. It's great. It's fantastic. It's really phenomenal. So I'd recommend to check it out for his performance alone. But everyone's great in this movie. Overall, solid performances all around. So yeah, definitely check that out, everybody. Iron Claw.
Solid pick, man. Oh crap! It's back to me, huh?
It's you, man. It's all you now. Number two. Gabe's number two.
We're number two, man. We've already actually talked about my number two. So my number two is actually Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon. Dude, it's just it's hard to even talk about that movie. The cruelty and the brutality of that story. Like I had never heard about what had happened with the Osage people and what they went through, and it is such a freaking emotionally intense story. That I think that movie was 3.5 hours long. He pulled another Irishman and did another 3.5 hours, but it didn't feel 3.5 hours to me. I saw it, like, I think it was like opening night Thursday at like 9 o'clock or something ridiculous like that. And I was completely invested in it. It's just an emotionally powerful movie. And I think personally for me, Robert De Niro, obviously he's, you know, a legend. He's done so many incredible movies. A lot of the stuff he's been picking as of late hasn't been that great. You know, I know he did The Irishman recently, but this movie, I think it just kind of reminded me of how of an incredible actor he is. Like, for some reason, that role he plays such a cruel, passive aggressive individual. And I think it just really stood out to me. And I'm like, this is kind of going back to the days of like Robert De Niro, where he's just, you know, he's pulling out all guns and he's delivering a fantastic performance. I know everyone's talking about Lily Gladstone. I think she does a fantastic job too. Leonardo DiCaprio does a freaking fantastic job as always. But for some reason, that role with Robert De Niro, just how sinister and how passive aggressive he is, it really kind of resonated with me. And Martin Scorsese, man, I mean, he's an OG. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to put a story together and how to develop characters. And by the end of it, you're just kind of like, you just can't believe that this actually happened. You know what I mean? Like, as soon as the movie was over, I'm Googling, you know, it's already freaking 1 o'clock at night, and I'm at home Googling like stuff with like the Osage community and what actually happened. Even reading parts of the book, because it's based off of a novel that was based off actual real life events. And it's just mind boggling that this happened. And you can tell, I think, with Martin Scorsese, with that ending scene, that this was just a huge passion project for him. Something that he was really emotionally invested in. And he kills it, man. I think it's literally one of the best movies of the year. I think it's probably going to sweep up the Oscars. It's probably one of the best Scorsese movies I've seen in a while. And I love all of Scorsese's movies. I think he just kills it every single time, but it's probably one of his top movies. If I ever had to do a ranking, it would be up there. So I think Killers of the Flower Moon, you know, a 3.5 hour runtime. I know that turns a lot of people away, but it doesn't feel 3.5 hours whatsoever. I think just because how engaging the story is and how mind-boggling the plot is, that it you're in it thinking that this couldn't have happened, and it actually did, and it's freaking mind-boggling even to this day. I can't wait till has a 4K come out yet? I don't think so. I think they released
it's been announced, I think.
Yeah.
In France, at least, like a steelbook or something.
Yeah, I think that's what I saw as a steelbook for it. So I'm hoping, because this is an Apple exclusive. So this was in cinemas, I think, for like a few weeks, and then it hit Apple for streaming. So I'm hoping it gets a 4K release, because it's honestly a gorgeous movie to look at. Just the way he filmed this movie, every frame is just freaking a piece of art, and it's so mesmerizing, man. And it's honestly one of his best movies that he's put out in a while. I love Martin Scorsese. He's one of my favorite directors of all time. And it's I can't say good enough things about this movie. There's actually, I would argue, there's nothing I would take away from this movie or critique about this movie. I think it's literally perfect. It's freaking mesmerizing. So if you guys haven't seen it, Killers of the Flower Moon, check it out. That's my number 2.
Yeah, it's actually coming out on the 12th, I think, Gabe. So yeah, guys, check it out 5 days from now.
For 4K physical release?
No, for streaming.
Yeah,
for streaming?
Apple TV release.
Yeah.
Since remember,
wow, it's still not on Apple yet?
Mm-mm.
Wow,
That's
I
what
wonder why it took so long. Holy crap.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Well, I hope it gets a 4K. This thing needs a 4K 100%. So
Yeah.
they better give it to us, or I'm gonna freaking riot. That's gonna be a travesty if we don't get it. So that's my silver trophy. Martin Scorsese, Killers of the Flower Moon. Chase Waggy Tail.
I'm actually surprised this. I'm starting to think maybe you guys just didn't see it, or maybe you guys did see it and didn't care much for it. I know we're all fans of this director. I think this movie might have suffered the same fate as Dungeons and Dragons was release timing. I think maybe even the runtime or the synopsis of this movie might have put a lot of people off, but it's definitely a big name out there. But my silver award, surprisingly, is going to go to Beau's Afraid. I had a great time with this movie. As I've said before, I love the weird. I love the kooky, the zany. The weirder the movie is,
quirky.
The more, I'm just going to be all in. So this movie runs over 3 hours, if I remember right, either over under just 3 hours. But this is Ari Aster. He did Hereditary and Midsummer. I know everybody knows of Beau's Afraid, but I know a lot of people didn't go watch it. But this is one of the to describe this movie, it is one of the biggest acid trips into the psyche of an individual that you can ever watch and experience. Like, have either of you guys watched it yet?
No, and I wanted to. That's another one that I've missed completely.
Yeah,
Joaquin Phoenix looks like he did a credible job in it.
He did. He plays like a mentally stunted individual. And you kind of see not necessarily antics, because it's not necessarily one of those movies where it's just like you could chalk it, he's crazy. You know what I mean? Like, to go back with what I was saying about Endless Men, where you can't trust everything that you're seeing, what it is. It's more or less like about how control can stunt the growth of an individual in the world and how he perceives it. Is the message that I took away from that story. It was confusing to a lot of people, but I also think because it had such a long runtime that it was harder to pick up for some people. Like, there's a closing out or starting out, because there's so much that happens. The second act of that movie, there's like a little theatrical play that he runs into in the middle of the woods, and it's one of the bigger acid trip moments of the movie. And so there is a lot of what you would just consider nonsense being talked about, but it literally gives you his life story. It literally gives you his life story. It tells you everything. It gives you every minor detail that you need from that single scene, or it's multiple scenes. It's a very long part, but it gives you so much information about him. And then from that part, because I was watching it and I was actually talking to the community as I was watching it, saying it was a little bit confusing. And that part right there is where a lot of people unfortunately fell off. But I feel like that's a little bit unfair, because there's so much important information that once it starts getting even weirder and crazier, that everything starts making just crazy sense. There's a lot of subliminal imagery, a lot of nods to this, a lot of nods to that. And Yeah, like it really did take me aback. I don't know if I'll be giving it a rewatch. I'm pretty surprised I took as much away as I did because sometimes I do have to give movies multiple rewatches just because I have the attention span of a goldfish. So like I have to give it like multiple watches to understand. So I'm pretty surprised I took away what I did and I relatively understood it. But it was something that I thought about for days on end and days on end. And I just watched this maybe I think while we were on hiatus not that long ago. So this is a pretty fresh watch. I didn't watch it like when it came out or anything like that.
Yeah, it came out early in the year, I think, right?
Yeah, it came out that same week. Because I remember whenever I was going around seeing some movies, it came out around the same time as Dungeons and Dragons. It was a March release date. But yeah,
I didn't
massive
think it was that
ode.
early.
Yeah, it was March, maybe April pushing it. I know it opened before
Yeah.
Super Mario. I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
But I think that's what I've heard it because it's one of A24's biggest fails or box office failures. So I think it definitely needs to find some love. I mean, I don't think they're going to chalk it up and have an immense like, oh no, we did poorly. As much as it's because it's Ari Aster, yeah, Hereditary, Midsummer. They're not going to sit there and be like, you made a bad movie. I think it just came down to timing, how it was like marketed, and the runtime. I think the runtime was extremely off-putting, especially whenever it's not like what we were talking about with John Wick, where we can get 3 hours of something and with an established universe. Sometimes, like, and then to your point on your last pick, Gabe, when it comes to Killers of the Flower Moon, it can be a little bit different because you have an established director.
Yeah.
And I think maybe they were banking on that with Ari Aster, and maybe that's where its shortcomings were. The movie's definitely not for everybody. It's weird, it's kooky, it's zany, it's crazy, it's you are just in a mentally stunted individual's mind. And you just embrace the world that he lives in. And it's something I want more people to watch. And, we always like to say, if you've seen it, go back down there, let me know what you took away from it. Because it is one of those movies that everybody can have a different take from it. So I've seen some takes as people where he's just crazy. I don't think you can chalk every movie that doesn't make sense to you up to the character's crazy. You know what I mean? There's always more, especially for 3.5 hours, over 3 hours long. There's a lot more to explain than, oh, we're just in a madman's world. No, there's a lot going on there. And I could really go in deeper, but it would spoil a lot because it's kind of, just give it a watch. That's what I'm going to say. And for anybody listening, let's clamor a little bit harder for a US-based release because that Steelbook or that media book is $50 overseas for 4K. So I just don't want to pay that price as much as I loved the movie. I'm used to paying like 30, 35 for those media books. I just don't understand why this one's getting taxed so much. So
$50. What did Severin decide to put it out over there?
Yeah, right.
Crazy, man.
I think it's Cape Light. It might be Turbine, but yeah, it's just like the X media book. It's just another one of those Christmas Bloody Christmas. I really just that movie with HDR, which I did watch it in 4K HDR Dolby on Apple TV, is how I watched it. It was on sale for $5 to own streaming, right? So to buy on there, but I want that on 100 gigabyte disc with HDR. That movie has to be reference quality. There's just no way that movie would just blow your mind with everything that it does. So yeah, the Silver Award goes to Beau is Afraid by Ari Aster. Definitely check it out.
Solid pick, dude. I gotta see it.
I have a feeling. Yeah, I feel like Will and I might as well. I feel a Power Rangers Unite moment coming on.
Hold on, ready? Oh no, I gotta use
the other way. The other way. Oh, there you go.
You gotta meet my hand. Meet my.
You gotta meet his hand, dude. You gotta do the fizz bump. There you go. Boom.
Because it didn't make your honorable mentions, so I felt it this whole time. So we'll cut the rundown time a little bit here, and we'll probably say it at the same time. Our gold award goes to
3, 2, 1.
Godzilla.
Or should we say -1?
Oh wow, you guys hit it up number 1. Wow,
yeah, number 1. Yeah. I could feel it.
Number 1.
He didn't make his honorable mentions list, so it had to be. It had to
That's
be.
true.
Because there's no way he
loved it.
Yeah. Great movie, man. Great movie.
Yeah.
It's like what Gabe said. Like, there's so much about it, that we dedicated a whole episode to it.
Yeah, and I actually kind of changed because originally I gave it like 4.5 stars, and I changed my letterbox rating. I said, "Screw it, dude. This is a 5-star movie. This is a 5-star movie."
Yeah.
You know, I'm not going to be nitpicky and because there's things that we talked about that we could nitpick about it. Some editing choices, which we mentioned on our Godzilla review. And for those of you on YouTube, if you haven't seen that yet, feel free to check that out for an extended, discussion on Godzilla -1. But yeah, I said this before when we had that discussion, guys. I think this is a movie that they should take to every boardroom in Hollywood, in Los Angeles, okay, and sit everybody down, okay, set up a nice OLED, okay, and hopefully in the near future when we get it on 4K, wink, wink, Toho, come on,
Yeah,
please,
come on.
okay, we pop that in there and we show everybody how an action blockbuster can be made, or okay.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody says, well, they don't make movies like that anymore. They don't make that. People said the same thing about Top Gun Maverick. Okay. Well, why is this movie so good? Why is this resonating with so many people? It's just a simple, straightforward movie in the case of Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. It's because modern movies, especially action films, these big blockbuster movies, their budgets are overinflated. They have to adhere to these crazy schedules and filming shoots and stuff like that. And I just think it's gotten to the point where some people can make the criticism and have made the criticism that they kind of get in their own way. They're just big, clunky, and don't know what they want to do or be or what kind of story they want to tell, and they just focus on the wrong things. And here's a movie that comes along, from Toho out of Japan, and it takes the world by storm. And first it said that it's a $15 million budget, and then we find out, I think later, realize it's actually lower than that.
It's lower?
Yeah, it's lower than 15
So
million.
I thought he said he wished it was $15 million.
Yeah, so it's under 15.
Had 15 million.
So we'd have to assume it's lower. He said, I wish I had that budget.
He wished he had more. Yeah.
Yeah. He wished he had 15 because he was interviewed and asked about
I thought when
it,
he said it, oh my God, no way.
No, yeah, he's like, I wish the budget was, I wish that, pretty much.
That's mind-boggling.
Yeah, and I wanted to shout out the effect of this movie. So word of mouth, just like Dungeons and Dragons, is hell of a power, right? So everybody that is asking me, because a lot of people in my personal life know about this and stuff like that, so they'll ask me for movie recommendations. And with it being December time, I was like, go see Godzilla. So I'm gonna shout out one of my friends. I told her to go and see it for whenever she was over here, and she went and saw Godzilla -1. That's definitely not her type of thing. But she does speak Japanese. So she was able to appreciate it a little bit differently, I feel like, because she didn't have to rely on subtitles. She could get more immersed into the film that was being presented. And she said she cried, everything like that. She loved it. It's one of the best movies that she's seen. And I don't think she has ever seen a Godzilla movie ever. So for somebody like that, outside of our world and, cinema goers and stuff like that, it's a hell of a power. Just even there's been random people asking me that. I see them again. And then they tell me that this movie was one of the best movies that they have seen all year. And there's not a single soul I have met that has not cried in that movie. Try and tell me in the comment. If you are a liar, if you tell me.
I was holding back that tear at the end, but it dropped down on my face. I admit it.
Yeah.
Everybody had to have shed a tear during this movie. At least if you were ugly crying, I can give you that if you didn't ugly cry. But if you did not shed a tear in that movie at any point, you're just soulless. I feel like, you're just stone cold. But yeah, shout out to that and the power of Godzilla. Yeah, Godzilla -1, absolute spectacle. Man, Gabe, now that we mentioned that, I feel like I'm pretty clueless about what your number one pick's gonna be.
What's my number one? I think I'm gonna drop a bomb on everyone here.
Oh, are you?
Blow things out of proportion a little bit.
Go for
it. Everyone's gonna go nuclear.
Bro.
Yeah. Exorcist believer. I think everyone's gonna go nuclear when I say what it is.
What is it, man? You're blue balling us over here. You gotta let it out.
Christopher Nolan's Oppenheimer. Everyone knew it.
Wow, dude.
Yeah. Whoa. Shocker.
Sit down for that one.
Huge surprise. Yeah. I'm not gonna go into that much, man. I mean, it's kind of like what Will said. I think this is probably because I might be doing a Nolan ranking video soon. So I've been kind of trying to compile where this fits in his filmography, and I think honestly, kind of like what Will said, this is probably his magnum opus for real. I mean, this is like to have a 3-hour freaking movie about a scientist, a biopic that's also kind of a courtroom drama that's not even a
Done super
linear.
well.
I mean, it's a typical Nolan non-linear. Like you're jumping from one time period to the next, back and forth, and it still tells a coherent story at the end of it. Hats off, you know what I mean? And obviously with Nolan, I appreciate he's shooting on film. Everything's practical, no CGI whatsoever. And the Trinity test, I think, is probably the best sequence I've seen all year. We talked about it earlier. Goosebumps, Tense Theater. It was like literally everyone was like, it reminded me of the scene kind of. I don't know if you guys saw the Joker in theaters when that came out with Joaquin Phoenix, when he's getting interviewed by Robert De Niro, and everyone's just, it's pitch quiet in the theater, and you're like, this guy's about to go off.
Yeah.
It
That was
reminded
a tense
me
moment in theaters.
It's very tense moment, and I felt the same way with Oppenheimer, man, where it's like, and you know what's going to happen. He's going to drop the bomb, and it's going to be a success. But it's the way Nolan does it. It's just beautiful to look at, man. And that scene, it's probably my favorite scene of the year. And just classic Nolan style. I mean, I think the reason I gravitate towards Nolan is just his ability to kind of tell a story in a non-linear fashion. Dunkirk was actually probably my top Nolan movie prior to this, just because I feel like that's where he kind of graduated. He was doing a lot of like the comic book science fiction stuff, and I think that's where he kind of graduated himself into kind of being a very masterful filmmaker. And even that movie, it's not linear. It's like it's jumping back and forth, but at the end, it just everything fits so well together. And I think he did it again with Oppenheimer, where he's telling this story that's just all over the place, but it's linear at the same time. So, plus he writes, he's a writer, director. I mean, he knows what he's doing at this point. So honestly, Cillian Murphy, Emily Blunt, Robert Downey Jr. I got to give a shout out to Robert Downey Jr. because honestly, that was an incredible performance. I think he's definitely going to get a nod for best supporting actor. That's a stacked cast, dude. There's so many people in that movie. Everyone
Gary
did a
Oldman
fantastic
too.
job.
Gabe.
Gary Oldman, dude, is freaking Truman, like coming out of the woodwork. I'm like, holy crap. Yeah, dude, just a fantastic movie. I've seen it. I saw it once on opening night. I saw it with my dad, just because he's into World War II kind of stuff like that, and he freaking loved it. I showed it to my brother recently here at the house with the 4K, and everyone just has an interesting visceral response to it. Whether you agreed with Oppenheimer or you didn't with what happened, it's an interesting kind of thought-provoking movie. When the credits roll, you can have a really kind of in-depth discussion about like what we did. Was it necessary? What does it mean for today? It's just one of those movies that I think it's going to resonate with people for a long time. So shocker. Yes, Oppenheimer is my number one.
And you really got this one.
I was tossing it up with Exorcist Believer, though. I was like, I don't know which one to put as my number one. But yeah, Oppie took the cake, gets the gold.
There we go. So Zilla, two nuclear beings.
Yeah, there you go.
With the from screen to shelf best of 2023 releases. I'm actually really happy. For the first annual one, I guess you could say, Will and I came to a consensus, and then Gabe's over here in his own corner.
Yeah,
I didn't even give Oppenheimer. I mean, I will. I'll give it a tip of the hat, mostly for performances. I used to be like super obsessed with World War II history. Mm-hmm. So like, it wasn't like there was a little bit of new information and stuff like that. I don't know how much creative. I didn't fact check anything after that, but yeah, it was Robert Downey Jr. Man, I think that might have been one of his first roles where he played like the biggest a-hole on screen. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just his snarkiness and everything like that. But thank you guys for the video listeners, our video watchers, for checking out our theatrical portion, or 2023 from the January 1st to December 31st releases. We're going to get into our physical media releases here just soon, and check out that video for our video only. Stay tuned for audio listeners as we dive right into physical media releases.